House of Mouse has got a new big cheese with Josh D'Amaro ascending the throne of Bob Iger as the next Disney CEO. But coming up from right behind him, Dana Walden taking on a brand new president and chief creative officer position that was apparently created just for her. Now, there have been chief creative officers at Disney in the past, most notably people with actual creativity. But we will see how Dana Walden fits into the new power structure at the Disney company. We're going to talk about it today on That Park Place. Guys, this is a fascinating story. Let's just dive in real quick for those of you that don't know or have been living under a rock or have not watched the Pro Show yesterday. Walt Disney Company has confirmed its next leadership transition, announcing that Josh D'Amaro will become the next Disney CEO effective next month. The decision, approved unanimously by the board of directors, ends months of speculation around Bob Iger's succession. Now, D'Amaro will formally assume the role of Disney CEO at the company's annual meeting on March 18th. Bob Iger will remain with the company in an advisory capacity through the end of the year, but his tenure as CEO effectively concludes next month, far earlier than anyone had originally planned on. Guys, that's the first thing that I want to discuss about this. Vash, we thought we had Bob Iger at least until the end of the year. We thought that maybe his successor would shadow him. They'd be announced earlier in the year, and then Bob Iger would step aside at the end of the year. But no, Bob Iger is gone in a little over a month.
This was a little bit surprising to see how hastily they actually went about this process. Now, not obviously as hastily as they went about the transition from Bob Iger to Bob Chapek back in, what was it? I think that was, February of 2020. So, I guess it has happened before. But this was, I think a lot of people coming off of that experience were expecting a more protracted process. Man, not the case. And I think a lot of people expected this too, because the company had really said that. They were extending the search out for some time in order to allow for, the candidates to be interviewed and so forth. Here, it happened real fast. They got in all of the board members from, pretty much all over the world, because you have like Mary Barra, for example. She's the CEO of GM. You have Mark Parker. You have all these different people. They were all coming into Burbank in order to vote for this, and they voted in quick right there. And so, now we have to examine, okay, what's this handoff actually going to be like? Bob Iger is still the current CEO of Disney, and that transition process didn't occur until March 18th at the next shareholder meeting. At that point, Josh D'Amaro will be activated as the company's next CEO, but also too with this, Dana Walden, who you may have heard as being acquired from that 21st Century Fox acquisition that Bob Iger made from 2017 to 2019. She will now be made the Chief Creative Officer at Disney and its president, which I think is very, very big news. Honestly, I think that might be actually bigger news to some degree than Josh D'Amaro being the CEO, because really his success rests in her hands creatively.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, Erica, we are now going to have someone that we can point to, when creativity in the Disney company falls short. That is going to be Dana Walden taking on. Now, the role that she is taking on is new, even though Chief Creative Officer is a title that's been given before. She is the President and Chief Creative Officer. And a lot of people are saying, so we got rid of Kathleen Kennedy, and now we just got a more powerful Kathleen Kennedy. What do you think about that?
Okay, so the creative officer position, is this for the parks too, or just entertainment?
This is everything, really. This is actually John Lasseter's old position when he was still with the company. He was the chief creative officer. Now, he was never president of the company. But here, Dana Walden actually serves as both positions right there. And it's interesting, too, because the president position, we haven't had one consistently, but obviously the most famous one being Frank Wells there, and how he supported Michael Eisner. And that's really the big thing here, is that Frank Wells was really in the support role. I don't know if that's the case for Dana Walden.
They both have big shoes to fill, and I hope their egos don't get in the way, because when we had Eisner and Wells together before Wells passed away, Disney was on fire. And then when John Lasseter was there, a lot of us were hoping he would eventually step into the role of CEO, because he is such he understands the Disney creative. He just seemed to have the whole package. I don't know if I really trust these two on either end, but a lot remains to be seen. And it's
that John Lasseter, he could have led the company to new heights of creativity, but he gave one too many hugs.
Yeah,
off the stage.
Darn.
Yeah. MJ, now here's my question to you. Given Josh D'Amaro's record with the parks, now we've seen happen during Josh D'Amaro's reign with the parks. Under Josh D'Amaro, we got the end of Muppet Vision. We got prices through the roof. We got the destruction of the Rivers of America. We got the destruction of Tom Sawyer Island, things like that. Also, Josh D'Amaro, I believe, was one of the main driving forces behind changing Splash Mountain over to Tiana's Bayou Adventure. So with that in mind, now, but I've also heard reports that Josh D'Amaro is a lovely person, that he maybe disagrees with Bob Iger on things, that when he's in the parks, he's very personable. He picks up trash. He talks to guests, and he really cares about the parks. Are you are you feeling good about him moving into the top spot, or do you think, wait, this is the guy that got rid of Muppet Vision? I don't think so.
No, I don't trust him at all. I'm actually apprehensive about how he's going to take care of things. You said it perfectly, and everyone else, in the chat, I agree with you guys. He is responsible for the destruction of Rivers of America, getting rid of Muppet Vision Courtyard in the 3D attraction. I don't care how much he smiles. I don't care how much trash he picks up off the floor, or how well he interacts with the cast members. That's great. But what about doing the right thing and believing in actual Walt's vision and giving us what we deserve as a fandom that grew up watching these beautiful films and also believing in what Walt believed in. And he needs to bring that. If he brings that, then yes, he has my vote, obviously, in the future again. But I am very apprehensive about how he's going to perform as CEO.
That's the interesting thing, Marvin. The CEO position for the Walt Disney Company is so much bigger than just a couple of divisions now. I mean, they're getting into gaming. The theme park division is now 70% of their overall, I believe, revenue, or at least profit. I mean, it's just a huge part of their business. Obviously, they're adding a slew of more cruise ships in that division, but you also have carriage disputes and carriage deals and so forth. How do you turn around broadcasting? How do you turn around cable networks and so forth? Something that used to be so big in Disney's portfolio. You have where will Disney be in this kind of AI race as we're seeing it here? That's going to transform the entire industry. Ted Sarandos just actually spoke with, I believe, the Congress about the acquisition of Warner Bros. Discovery, and was questioned very hard on what the theatrical slate will actually look like, especially if Netflix does gain access to Warner Brothers, and what happens if the theater industry collapses. What will Disney do at that point? The CEO has to navigate all of that, and I don't know if he's necessarily equipped or ready or competent enough in order to navigate these waters right here. In fact, I don't even know where Disney will be, or any company will be at the end of this AI race, and how that will transform the industry. If Netflix decides to pull their content and this theatrical industry collapses, what's Disney gonna do here? I don't even know. Go ahead, MJ.
No, did you see the clip of Josh D'Amaro talking about he's promising that AI will not get in the way of people's creativity. Did you guys happen to see that? Do you believe do you believe what he said, though? I mean, I'm trying to.
No, they're about to put user-generated AI content on Disney Plus. There's no way, and as soon as other studios start using AI, and let me tell you something right now, James Cameron has been laying the ground for using AI on the next Avatar movies. That's why James Cameron is doing all of these interviews where he's going like, oh, we may have to pull the plug, guys. These movies are so expensive, blah, blah, blah. They're never pulling the plug on those movies. They're never pulling the plug on them. He's saying this because they're going to start using AI for things. And he's trying to make, it was either this or just fold, guys. What was I supposed to do? And I think that that's what's going to happen.
Well, you don't make $1 billion investment into OpenAI for an equity stake if you're not going to utilize their technologies. I just don't see that, and how you navigate that whole thing. And then the NFL and ESPN deal was just approved by the U.S. government. How do you incorporate NFL products into ESPN that would necessarily satisfy Roger Goodell and the other 31 owners as part of that NFL deal? This is all stuff that this CEO is going to have to navigate. I just don't see him doing that. I see him as a smiling face. Please.
The other question about Josh D'Amaro is, will he steer the company out of politics? Because with Dana Walden in a high up position, you'd have to think politics are going to be front of mind, because Dana Walden is Kamala Harris's bestie. She is incredibly political and incredibly involved in what we call the quote unquote woke politics. Josh D'Amaro, we don't really know. Is he going to try to do what Bob Chapek did and steer the company out of that? And will he hit the same resistance? Will that resistance come from Dana Walden? Who, by the way, I really need to know what kind of like diet and skincare regimen Dana Walden does, because that woman is 61 years old.
Impressive. Very, very impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the question. Do you think they're going to try to steer the company out of politics?
I see. Especially with Dana Walden, it gives me pause, right? Because I think in 2022, she had written a kind of company memo or a statement regarding, remember the firing of Peter Rice, which was a big upset, right? A lot of people were like, whoa, that's pretty crazy that Bob Chapek would actually do that. But Dana Walden stood by Bob Chapek in the decision. And in that letter, she says that at the television networks and so forth, that inclusion was the top priority, not a top priority. The top priority.
Wow.
And so we know that she is friends with Kamala Harris and all of the baggage that potentially brings with it. It's just she is very steeped in the politicking or the political realm right here. And I have to think that some of that's going to bleed over into the content. And in this case, because she's chief creative officer, that might be a wider net than previously asserted before.
Now, here's my question. My follow-up question now is, we talked about Josh D'Amaro, we talked about Bob Iger, we talked about Dana Walden. The big question mark is, who is going to take over the theme parks now in the experiences division, now that Josh D'Amaro is moving into the top job? And we can assume that Alan Bergman will just become the sole chair of the Disney Entertainment division. But what's going to happen with the parks and experiences, the most important job in the company, I would dare say, because it is the most profitable division. I would say give it to Photon Empress, but because she's volunteered to take it on, but that's probably not going to happen. So, so who do you guys think is going to take it over?
No clue.
That's the question of the hour.
MJ, Erica, any?
Can't think of anyone.
Sure
My mind draws a blank.
Go ahead, Vash.
There's a few, but
Apply the dog to war.
Well, I do apologize. I don't mean to take anybody's voices on this, but I think when I lay out the case, I'm really interested to see what MJ, Erica, and even you, Marv, have to say about this, because I'm thinking it's Jeff Alley. Now, apparently there have been some older statements. I haven't been able to research these myself, but apparently he had declined the offer before. Obviously, things have changed now, and well, he is running the flagship resort for the company, so it would make sense that you lift him up, because if you don't, it's kind of an indictment of his performance if you just pass him by. So I think he'll at least be offered.
Yeah,
please.
I'm putting my money on Thomas Maslin.
Right. Thomas Maslin, the president at Disneyland Resort. Yes.
I think he's the more likely candidate. Not just because I've heard that from somebody, but I did hear it from somebody that I trust. So, but well, yeah, I don't know. He seems like the kind of guy that they would want to promote into that. What do you think?
He has a decent history. Obviously, he ran Cruise Line, which is one of the most successful products in all of the Disney parks library right there. We often talk about Walt Disney World, we often talk about Disneyland, but the cruise lines really are where those double-digit revenue gains have been made before, and it's why they've been so aggressive in adding to their fleet. So it makes sense. I've also heard Ken Potrock. He was the previous head of Disneyland, especially during the time of kind of rebuilding post pandemic, because he literally got the job, I think, like maybe days before the parks went dark for 412 days, and had to really staff back up, because remember, they had cut, I think it was in excess, I think it was like 28,000 cast members, a lot of those coming from Disneyland. So they had to hire up and so forth. And it was a very laborious process for Disney Resort in particular. And he kind of steered them out of that. Now he has since been assigned to handle some big time events, especially in the LA area with the World Cup and the Super Bowl, and I do believe the Olympics that are going to be in the LA area, and also to handling the 250th anniversary of the country and the company's position on that and the celebrations and so forth. So, it makes sense, but I don't know. I'm not sure he has the same breadth of experience that Thomas Moslem has, for example.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure that an announcement about this is coming sometime within the next week or two. They're probably letting the dust settle from the CEO announcement, and then they'll make it. Because the one thing you have to remember is that when these big announcements are made, there is an impact to the stock. So I'm sure they're trying to mitigate, whatever impact is going to happen. But I'm sure that before, Josh D'Amaro is officially given the job at the meeting in March, that we will find out more about who's going to be running the experiences division. It is too important. Because it's going to be an entire internal shuffle going on, because then let's say Thomas Maslin takes over the experience division, then somebody else has got to take over Disneyland. So, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be a huge, reshuffling of what's going on throughout both the theme parks and film and, cruise line and all of that stuff. So time will tell whether Josh D'Amaro can actually steer the ship in the right direction, or if Disney has just hit the iceberg.
Thanks for watching That Park Plays News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.